story I'm about to tell you took place over the course of perhaps 90 seconds. Now, I'm walking up to the UPS store. My goal today is really simple. I'm going to pick up a package, head over to the gym, come back to the house to work from my home office right here for the rest of the day. I'm in no particular hurry. So I'm moseying up to the door. There's a lady and a gentleman coming from the other direction, although they don't appear to be together. Turns out they weren't. The lady in the front, who's closest to the door, it's about 25. She opens the door first, and as she's walking in, she holds the door open for me, who's the next closest to the door, and then the other gentleman is like right behind me. We're all basically converging on the door at the same time. But it's her, and then me, and then him. We walk through the door, and the attendant is coming out of the back, serving at the front desk, and so he makes eye contact with me. I walk over to my box, and just to quickly explain what I mean here, I am picking up packages like every couple of days over there. And so they're used to me, and they know basically when we make eye contact, that means that I'm here to get a package and I just need to get my ticket out of the box. And so nobody else knows about this sort of unspoken arrangement, and that's fine, but that's kind of the way that's been going lately. So as soon as I see him, he kind of gives me the nod, like, I know why you're here. So I went ahead, walked over, and got my ticket out of my box, and then he came back. As I'm coming back to the area where you would normally have a line, the two of them are both standing pretty much equidistant from the attendant. Like, nobody's really standing in line. They're just standing side by side and both looking at the attendant. So I walked over, and I kind of end up in the big empty space in the middle, since there's a wall on both sides and they're not standing very close to each other. I walk over in the middle. Both of them are looking at their phone, and the attendant is kind of looking at all of us. And so the lady looks up and she says, "Oh, I'm going to be a minute. You can go ahead and serve the next person." And the attendant waves me up, and he's got his hand out ready to grab my ticket. So it's like, okay, like that happened really fast. I just went ahead and stepped up, handed him my ticket, and the guy to my right just explodes. I mean, he is angry. "Oh, you're going to just cut in line today? Is that how you want to be?" And he starts calling me names. Now, my gut reaction to this was, you know what? I'm going to be out of here in less than 60 seconds. I'm just going to ignore him. This is not worth my energy. So I'm ignoring him at first, and he's still calling me names. And there's a point where his voice goes up a notch, and he's yelling a little bit louder and calling me more offensive names. Now, it's interesting what happens here, because I'm not upset, but my body is definitely responding. I mean, we're talking about within a few milliseconds, the tone in his voice indicated to me that there was a threat. My feet had spread out, my hands tightened up, my heart rate went up. I mean, like the feeling I was feeling, I'm starting to feel it again. It was so intense that just my body was ready for a fight. And I'm looking at him. I mean, again, in milliseconds, I've decided 30-ish-year-old male, mid-sized build, I could pin him to the floor and hold him down until he stops moving. I have no intention of hurting this guy. I just want him to stop. And so I would do what I need to do to make him stop. But it's interesting to me how fast that happened. I haven't moved. He hasn't moved. He's still technically looking at his phone, which was another weakness that I noticed. But all of that happened so fast that my body and everything, my vision had narrowed. I couldn't see the woman to my right anymore. I was laser focused on him, and I was ready to go. But I wasn't upset. I was just like, my body was ready to defend itself. And I want to be clear, when I say that I wasn't upset, I just mean that his words weren't offending me. As far as I was concerned, he was like a middle schooler calling me poo-poo head, although those weren't the words he was using, and they weren't racial slurs, because I know that some people are going to be curious about that. But these names were clearly meant to offend me, and the tone in his voice indicated that there was physical danger, and that's what I was responding to. In fact, in hindsight, it's pretty obvious that the whole reason he escalated is because I was so unaffected by his words that he was hoping to inflict some kind of emotional damage. He wanted to hurt me, at least emotionally at this point. And so he had to step up his game, so to speak, to make that happen. So getting back to the story. And so I'm thinking, am I really going to have to be in a fight today over this? Like, this is the most ridiculous thing, an offense That's not even an intentional offense. Even if I had just walked in the door and stepped in front of him, it wasn't worth this, not in my opinion. But we care about intent, right? He's not even paying attention to the fact that this sort of happened incidentally. And in his defense, I would say he was distracted. He was looking at his phone and he probably didn't notice that the attendant called me up first, that it wasn't that I just wanted to step in front of him and I also walked in the door ahead of him. So anyway, we have our whole legal system based on the premise that we care about the person's intent. So whether he was actually, whether he was actually slighted or not, I think is less important than the fact that, whether I intended to slight him or not, right? It's why we have a different sentence for manslaughter versus first degree murder. So I thought, okay, if I plead my case, maybe we can calm this down a little bit. And as I turned to him, I said, well, sir, we came in about the same time. And he's like, rah, 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 rah. And he got even angrier. And he finally looked away from his phone. And he's like, today is not the day. I got 2 kids at home and you don't want none of this. And in that moment, I took a deep breath. And that was when I realized this is way bigger than me. This has nothing to do with me. I felt my heart rate come down just a little bit. And I actually started to feel some pity for him. Like I'm thinking about this Bible verse and I realize that everybody watching this is not a Christian or believes in the Bible, but just go with what I'm saying for a second so you understand what I was feeling. There's a scripture where the Bible says that Jesus looked upon him and loved him. Talking about this man who was making excuses for himself and he thought he was justified and he didn't know where his heart really was. And Jesus the Bible says he looked at him and he loved him. And that was that's the closest thing I can think of that I experienced in that moment. I felt compassion and love, but I also felt sorry for him because again, in 60 seconds, I'm going to walk out of here. I'm going to be fine. He's going to be angry all day. He's going to go home and probably shout at his kids and be angry with them. He's going to complain to everyone he meets about this guy who offended him in the store over something that was nothing. I mean, nothing. And I just felt pity for him. And I thought, what happened to this guy today? Is he really just flying off the handle like this all the time? Because that's an awful way to live. Or did he just have the worst possible day of his life and I'm catching him at his lowest moment? Did his wife just leave him? Did he just leave? Did he just lose somebody really important to him? Does he not know how to control, his feelings? And this is how he's expressing this deep sadness. I'm imagining a deep sadness. I have no idea what he really felt. I'm just saying I also have no idea what he went through right before he walked into that door. And so that went through my brain in just a flash. I felt this compassion. I felt this deep sorrow. It's like I felt a little bit bad because I was going to be fine and I knew he wasn't. And then I just said, sir, I'm sorry. That wasn't enough for him. He was still angry. He was like, what? Sure, you're sorry. You're rah, rah, rah. And at that point, I just kind of tuned him down. I rotated my body a little bit so that I could keep my eye on him because I'm not a fool. But I'm also watching for my package. Man comes out with my package. I grab it. I get a glance at the lady who is just terrified at this. And when I leave the store, it's over for me, right? My heart rate comes back down. I go to the gym. I have a pretty good workout. And the whole while I'm working out, I'm thinking about, I can't wait to get home and tell my kids about just what happened because this is a fantastic learning moment for them. And then again, I felt sorry. I felt sad again because I thought, I'm going to get a great family moment out of this, and he's probably still angry. And I don't know how to feel about that because that's not what I wanted. It's not what I wanted for him, and he brought it on himself. So here's my question for you. Are you that guy who just explodes over nothing? Or maybe you are having a terrible day sometimes, and you are tired of your work situation, you got this immense amount of stress and your budget is crushing you, and then your kids just want to play and you explode on them. My goal today is just to say, man, it's not worth it. Take a minute to take a deep breath. If you need to install a punching bag in your garage and you pull up, you hit it a couple times and just release a little bit of energy, take a deep breath, and then go in and enjoy your family, man. For me, the person that I talk to is my spouse. And I realize that everybody hasn't built that relationship where they can just be vulnerable and tell their wife whatever they're feeling or thinking. And in some cases, maybe it's the spouse that's creating the stress and making you feel that way. And she's the one person who is not in a position to really hear what you need to tell her. I don't know what your situation is, but my goal today is just to say, man, you got to figure out how to deal with your emotions and with your stress. It's not just discipline. It's not just about managing your anger. It's more than that. It's about desiring to be the better man. Because I know plenty of guys who have tons of discipline. They can go to the gym, their body is ripped, they measure all their food, but they can't keep their penis in their pants long enough to save their marriage. It's got nothing to do with discipline. That's what they desire. So what I'm here to tell you today is you got to put your desires in a place. And by desires in this case, I mean you need to put your family and your kids in a place where you desire them more than these other things that are causing you to explode or lose yourself. Maybe you need to find a friend who you can say, man, or maybe you don't have enough good friends like this, but it's time to start making them, right? You call one of them who's ever closest to the meeting the standard and you say, man, look, I need to share something with you that you can't tell anybody, and I'm embarrassed to tell you, but I need to talk to somebody about it. And you'll be surprised what that can do for you. But however you decide to manage it, you got to manage it, right? You got to do it for yourself so you're not angry all day, so you're not exploding at random strangers, you're not terrifying young ladies in a UPS store and yelling at people who aren't even offended and wondering why you're yelling at them. And that was me. I don't know how I offended him. I mean, I have the surface level what he seemed to be barking about, but that didn't match the situation. It just didn't. I went back to the UPS store the next day to apologize to the attendant, not, for this guy. Because I was like, man, he probably ruined that guy's day too. And to my surprise, as I walked in the door, the first thing the attendant says, he's like, man, I'm sorry about the way that guy behaved the other day. That was awful. And I thought, wow, I was here to apologize to you for the way he behaved. And we kind of got a little chuckle out of that, and we relived it, if you will, and talked through what happened. And he was telling me about how upset the lady was and, that she was shaking. But I couldn't see her because I was focused on him. He had become a threat, and I was prepared. Like, even though I didn't want to be like that, my body was responding to that. And so I couldn't even be in a position where I could, block her or keep her out of it. I mean, it wasn't my job to do that either. It was just the situation that this random stranger put me in. And so I am so glad that this happened, because when I got home, I got to talk to my kids about how to deal with anger. And maybe you'll do the same today, right? Maybe you'll talk to them about a situation you've dealt with, and it doesn't matter if you handled it well or if you handled it terribly. In fact, if you did a terrible job, it makes the story just that much better. I promise. So talk to your kids about managing anger and, what you plan to do about it. And maybe if I'm hitting too close to home and this is you are struggling to manage your anger, then maybe you can't quite talk to them about it, but you can start dealing with it. All right, go be a dad. I just realized I turned the camera off without telling you how my family responded. So my boys, being boys, were like, you should have hit him while he wasn't paying attention to see how he would have responded, which is the teenage boy thing to do, I guess. Foolishness. So I talked him out of that. It's like, you don't need to hit people in order to solve problems. But interestingly, before I let you go, my daughter said, I would have just left. Why didn't, I would have walked away. You don't have to stay. And I thought, that's true. I could have just walked away. It never even crossed my mind. And then my wife chimed in and she said, you were on a mission. Your daddy was not going to leave without that package. And I thought, my wife knows me well. He could have been way worse, and I was not leaving that place without my package. I don't know why, but that's just the way I am. I get a goal and I stick with it. So turns out the package wasn't even something I ordered. It was just something sent to me by some random company who wanted me to use their stuff. I threw it in the trash, but I am so glad I got that package. Okay, for real this time. Go be a dad.